offloading sea urchins. Give an example of effects. This is a lobsterman. He's pulled his trap in. There's a possibility that the rope, the trap rope, could form a loose half hitch on his boot. As he baits the trap and throws it overboard with the boat trolling forward, it can pull the trap out and then fishermen following him. And that has happened in a number of instances. Fishermen have come up with a rope locker that spools the rope below deck as the trap is drawn into the boat, solving that problem. And so this is Doug Goodale. He suffered a winch accident that really ripped his arm off. It then threw him overboard. The cold water cauterized the wound so that he could get back in his boat. I don't know how he did it, but he did, and drive to his harbor, where two other fishermen rushed him to the hospital. And his first words to his wife, "Well, honey, I still have my wedding ring on his right hand." He went to work with a refitted boat with his wife as his deckhand. And on the eve of his return to fishing, he was getting his captain's haircut when his niece asked him what happened to his arm, and he kind of winked at me. He said, "Got it caught in Grandma's cookie jar." To relieve the tension of the moment. Of course, we all know better. I spent 10 days photographing on a 80-foot steel-hulled dragger, 120 miles offshore in December out of Portland, Maine. This is Woody Woodbury, a deckhand, shoveling off 18 inches of snow the day the boat departed. Scott Russell, the captain, bidding farewell to his sweetheart. About to head out. And then they deployed these outriggers for stability. And one of the outriggers, the cable got caught in the block, and first mate Gabe Foley, before I know it, barely had time to get the shot, was out on that outrigger, untangling the block. It's a little like an industrial factory on a rocky platform, subject to the vagaries of the weather. And so every 4 hours, the crew would bring in the catch, these huge nets, take about 2 hours to process and gut the fish, load it into the fish hold, ice it down. If they're lucky, have 2 hours of rest, and then do it all over again for 10 days in a row. The stress on the fisheries has had a strong impact on safety. If you remember the film and book, The Perfect Storm by Sebastian Younger, the Andrea Gale was loaded with swordfish as the storm was approaching. Their ice machine broke. And they risked, if they didn't go through the storm, they risked losing their entire catch. And so the sister ship to the Andrea Gale went seaward and avoided the storm. The Andrea Gale went through the storm because of economics, and 6 fishermen died. They were full icing the catch. Scott Russell, the captain, warning of rising seas. A rogue wave hit the boat about 10 o'clock. The fishermen had their sharp knives in their hands. They're tossed around the boat, none of them overboard. But the back of the boat filled with water and fish, and they quickly had to dive in and open the scuppers to release that trapped water in the boat, because it was low in the water. If another wave came, it confounded the boat. So the fishermen were wet. They lost their catch as it went out the scuppers. They had to dry off and start again. And so this is a shot in a harbor of a lobster boat that was low in the water. The bilge pump was not operating properly. A quick change in wind direction capsized the boat, and these fishermen are trying mightily to get a tie line on the hull to drag it closer to shore so the boat isn't entirely lost. It's an example of how a sea change can impact the livelihood and safety of the fishermen. Robert Rainville, he was 18, not in that his father's adequate fishing boat pictured on his gravestone, but an 18-foot skiff. The outboard motor on the skiff caught the lobster trap line in the prop. Robert went to the back of the boat, upended the motor, reaching over, putting his weight and the upended motor, stern of the boat low in the water, trying to get the trap rope off. Wave came, swamped the boat. Robert was found 3 days later lodged in a reef. And so these are the lucky fishermen who get to be buried on land in Gloucester, Massachusetts, at the Beach Brook Cemetery. These lads have joined the silent majority. Here lie in peace. This is a poultry farmer in Mayfield, Kentucky. It begins a series of pictures that I took. These are in a poultry plant in Montgomery, Alabama. Mostly H-2B guest workers from Mexico. The Big Dig in Boston. A laborer with a good personal protective gear. A laborer who's breaking concrete without hearing protection, or respiratory protection. Led to OSHA promulgating the silica standard, one of the last laws that Barack Obama authorized before his presidency ended. Trench hazards take lives in New York State with regularity. With inadequate shoring, you can see how a worker can be easily trapped and suffocated under earth and water. And so this series goes to showing innovative devices that ironworkers are using. This man has a radio that he's in voice contact with the crane operator as they, as a team, set girders in a new building in Connecticut. And this iron worker is moving along high steel, but he has a tie-off that moves with him along the girder. To me, this picture kind of captures the visualness of the workplace. I am so drawn to the world of work. It's such a vivid picture opportunity. The first day the general public was allowed in Manhattan after Ground Zero, I traveled to the periphery of Ground Zero. And here in the background, you see the pile, and this sign kind of aptly reflects the loss of life of some 3,000 lives on Ground Zero. I eventually got an assignment with the operating engineers who were using these huge grappling machines to open up the pile. Their health was in jeopardy from the smoke and dust, and industrial hygienist and I went to the cabs of these grappling machines, and pumps were set in the cabs and outside the cabs to measure the environment. But in this case, the firemen are observing and looking for human remains as the pile is opened up. It's the Woolworth building in the back. The men in the man basket are iron workers. They're about to begin the demolition of the Marriott Hotel at the base of the photo. At the same time, I rode on the subway to the West Broadway subway stop. Many office workers were returning to their nearby offices for the first time. There was a sense of worry about who had lived and who had died, even in their own office, as they had to evacuate Lower Manhattan in the midst of this tragedy. These men, communication workers and transit workers, were responsible for restoring the fiber optic network that allowed the stock exchange to resume business. I think the words speak loud enough in this picture. The general public installed shrines at firehouses that had suffered great loss. This particular firehouse had lost 15 firefighters. New subject, worked with the UMass Lowell as they studied hotel workers and the strains and strains of the work that is involved using lumbar motion monitors. Back to Doc Rasmussen's clinic 30 years later. He's still at work, the miners are still sick. Don Rasmussen died about a year and a half ago, still on the job. Here, the good doctor is informing this miner that he, in fact, does qualify for federal black lung benefits. And so, coal mining is no longer the most dangerous job in America. This picture goes a long way toward explaining why. Remember we talked about roof falls? Well, there's a shot of this miner, the roof bolter, protecting from a collapsing roof. You can see in the foreground a square plate with a bolt in the middle that's already been bolted. But this is the roof bolter's machinery in action with the protection above him. The continuous miner operator is now back away from the coal face using a remote control device in cleaner, fresher air. The shuttle car operator enjoys the benefit of a canopy over his shuttle car that hauls the coal to the belt line and then out of the mine. And so miners do enjoy health and safety progress. Though we know from the disaster in 2010 that explosions that result from management carelessness and rush for production still claim lives. This is a widow from the Sago mine disaster that claimed 11. The story goes on and on. But I have spent time photographing hospital workers in recent years. and so here we're looking at Jenny Lynn in the Hospital University of Pennsylvania Emergency Room. This was part of a series for an exhibit called Just a Nurse, a tribute to the nursing profession. So hospital work has its own hazards. Hepatitis B and HIV virus, personal protective equipment is essential to be using. And this is an example where the nurse's credibility with this terminally ill cancer patient was transferred to me. The patient said to the nurse, "Sure, I want you to get your picture taken. I'm proud to help you with that because you have been there every day for me." Various scenes in the hospital, postpartum nursery. Laura Taylor, about to work with a physician on open heart surgery. Sharon Wright, computer-assisted gastro bypass surgery. In 2007, I spent the harvest season photographing what I call new Americans at work. This is Roberto Meja from Honduras, proud of his legal documentation, and he was glad to show it to the camera. But as a general rule, about half of the workers in Maine do not have such documentation. This is a tree planting crew. They go deep in the woods for hours and hours. The worst transportation accident in Maine's history, 14 immigrant workers died when a large passenger van with 14 overturned as it went off a bridge in the fog. All those occupants drowned. These are tree planters at work in El Salvador. Thinning the trees here. This crew of guest workers was brought in from Watsonville, California on a chartered plane to harvest the broccoli crop in Merced County, Maine. Heading home after work, the Maine Migrant Health Program local clinic is available for Sebastian Hilgado as nurse practitioner. Barbara Ireland identified his complaints. Physician Michael Rowland examined Sebastian. Nurse practitioner Suzanne Lupke is examining the tree thinner and tree planter. Armando Jimenez has an eye injury that is being observed. One of the farmers said the migrant labor force is the engine of our agricultural economy. We would not be able to harvest our crops without them. And so you're looking here at Javier Perez, a Mexican egg house worker in Turner, Maine. Jamaican harvesters in New Gloucester, Maine, north of Portland. The blueberry harvest is often harvested by Native Americans who hold dual citizenship between Canada and the U.S. This woman has an inadequately designed blueberry rake, making her job stoop labor. There's a nurse practitioner with the Maine Migrant Health Program doing outreach for a blueberry harvester with a foot injury. This is a better designed blueberry rake with longer handles and the rake in action. Father and son Native Americans in a labor camp in Washington County, Pennsylvania. Excuse me, Washington County, Maine. The pesticide hazard is real, and thankfully the EPA mandates farm workers pesticide training at the harvest site. Here we're looking at Winston Grant, who's been harvesting apples for 10 seasons. He's on an 18-foot ladder, putting apples in a well-designed apple bag that is secured at his shoulders and at his waist and empties from the bottom. But better agriculture is leaving behind those large orchard trees and creating smaller versions so that the hazards of harvest are greatly reduced. This is Mondo Clark with a blueberry rake, the cranberry rake in the bog. He's receiving a handoff from another worker. And here you have workers who are well into their late 60s. Hugh Rodney and Mondo Clark. There's a sense of pride about what they do, nonetheless. Near where I live, I've started to photograph new immigrants in my own community. This is not far from where I live in the eastern shore of Maryland. Husband who works in the boat industry. Mom works as a housekeeper. Restaurant workers in the eastern shore of Maryland. Housekeepers from Brazil. This lady is showing off her children on her cell phone, but she hasn't seen them in 5 years.